What is up, everyone, and welcome to another JellyPod episode. I'm here with Cameron from Mav100, and they are teaching students how to live in a decentralized world. So today we're going to learn a little bit more about Cameron's journey and sort of what they're working on over at Mav100. Cameron, welcome to the podcast today. I always like starting off with learning about the founder and their journey. So did you want to give like a quick rundown of how you got into the crypto space? And I know you're super into Cardano, so I'm interested in learning, how
Yeah.
you ended up finding your base there.
Well, let's see here. I'm one of three founders. My brother, he lives down in Alabama, and he works for Boeing in tandem with NASA. He's a programmer down there. And then one of the other founders is up here. His name is Chris Guerin. And basically, the way we started into the whole crypto realm was back before COVID, and just started invest out. And I don't know, I think it's similar to a lot of people, as they kind of went in and they were like, oh, I'm going to try to invest in this thing. I heard about, it's one of the big meme coins or BTC or something like that. And then like, oh, what could I invest in? And so I started looking down the list. Obviously Cardano popped up in the top 10, and I invested and just kind of passively kept an eye on things for about 6 months. And it was very volatile. And I was like, well, I'm going to start actually investigating what this is all about. And that's when blockchain kind of exploded in my mind, as far as how it was going to take over a lot of different places. And I have several different businesses that I'm involved with. And so I was like, I can find efficiencies in all of my businesses using this technology. So going through and actually identifying the different things about the technology that were impressive and potentially useful in the business world, Cardano kind of floated to the top. I didn't need, blazing fast transaction times or finality. I needed security, accountability, and transparency. And so that's what really got me down the road. And then just looking at how the technology and the roadmap were laid out for Cardano, having a wealth of information with all of the different, the peer-reviewed papers, the ability for people to go into it and look at this open source roadmap. It was just a no-brainer as far as how I would like to integrate it into my business operations. And so, with Cardano, the community was very welcoming. And so started getting into it after about a year. Things were pretty exciting. A lot of brand new, I got in right when smart contracts got going with Sunday Swap, with the Sunday Swap launch. And I started understanding all that part of it. All the different projects that were getting going right at the beginning, got some good projects. Cornucopias got in as an OG there. Got in some not so good projects, Ardana and things like that burnt some people.
We all did.
Yeah. Yes. And so it was an interesting ride. So all the way through there, just kind of narrowing down more and more what I was going to use the blockchain for. It stopped becoming an investment for me, and it became a way for me to take some of my businesses to a different level. I'm involved with some boring stuff, like groundwater remediation. So one of my businesses, we manufacture pumps, valves, tubing, and it's called Waterra USA. We own the US branch, and there are a lot of ways where I can integrate blockchain into how we integrate some of our clients, how they operate in tandem with different government agencies. And then also we got involved with a really big project that a lot of people are familiar with, which is World Mobile. And it was Rare Evo a couple of years ago where we decided that we were going to dive in. We got an Earth node and we started canvassing the area throughout central Washington and trying to figure out if there was a need for better connectivity, and absolutely is. And so we did a whole bunch of work with the different schools, and I'll kind of talk about how we got working with the school angle in a little bit here. But basically, what it came down to was we live in a very mountainous area. Cell service is terrible around here, and you can't have cell service, with T-Mobile or AT&T or Verizon, that has ubiquitous coverage. It's very localized to different communities where the different big carriers work. And so we were like, well, we could set up our own little network that works everywhere throughout this county. And so we went in and talked with World Mobile, and they were like, oh, wow, you guys actually did your homework, know what you're doing, canvassed, your community, figured out who would jump in on this. And so that's where it all started. And now we've built a network, and, it spans several miles, and it's really interesting. And then we started integrating the schools into it because we were like, what's the best way to get outreach with this business to people throughout the community? Well, there are kids throughout in every nook and cranny within this county, up different ravines and canyons. And so when we went in and we talked to the school, we're like, we want to teach these kids how this works. And then after we do that, we want the kids and the schools to own a part of this network. So it helps funding the schools, helps fund these kids' future. A lot of people talk about the concept of universal basic income. Personally, I'm not a big fan. Those types of systems usually don't work out very well for people. I like more the idea of universal basic ownership. And so people owning the fundamental infrastructure of the things that govern their lives makes a lot more sense to me, and not in a situation where it's just handed to them, but a situation where they earn it and they own it themselves. And as things change, they can continue to keep up with the times, be more competitive. And it just creates a situation where everybody's a little bit stronger instead of dependent on somebody else. So, yeah, I just spewed a whole bunch of
Dude,
stuff there.
I was about to say, you just dropped a lot of stuff all at the same time. Kind of taking a little bit of a step back here. It sounds
Yes.
like you had a lot of business experience, or have a lot of business experience. And essentially, when you saw blockchain, you were like, hey, there's an opportunity to use this blockchain technology in some of these different businesses that either you already had exposure to or that you knew about in some sort of way. And Cardano particularly interested you because of the security and the decentralized aspect of it. And you sort of came to the conclusion, hey, why don't I figure out a way to use this blockchain technology into these different businesses? And then I guess educate people on that. Can you I guess do a little bit of a concise breakdown of what Mav100 is about, like what you're actually trying to achieve?
All right. So it's kind of right in our slogan there, teaching students to live in a decentralized world, right? And so it's taking the ability to operate any fundamental infrastructure and decentralizing that, spreading it as far to the edges as possible, right? Teaching these kids what blockchain can do, and helping them manage the capital and manage their activities, manage the value that they create with this different fundamental infrastructure. So yeah, we're really looking to help decentralize not just the ownership, but the understanding of all of these different systems. We actually have a very strong partnership with an organization called the Self-Driven Foundation. It's run by Mark Byers, and they have their goal is they've created this wonderful learn to earn package. And so what we started doing is with Mav100 is we went to the school boards in 5 different school districts throughout the county. and we just talked to them about what we could do, because funding kind of hit an all-time low in Washington State. For schools, they were cutting, one of the school districts, they cut like 40 people. That has a serious impact on what's going on with the students, the different programs that they're able to get involved with. And we said, okay, at a base level, we can use this technology to manage a lot of the different things that people use to fundraise around here. I don't know. Well, you're from the United States. Do you remember when you were in school, going in and they're saying, "Oh, we're going to have this thing where you can, if you sell a whole bunch of these candy bars or these cake pops or whatever, and you can maybe if you sell a whole bunch, you get this boom box or something like that, right?"
Yeah.
Well, we were like, okay, I remembered that, and I have kids that come to the house, and I have like 3 subscriptions to Natural History now, just because the kids are like, "That's the guy that never says no," right? And it's like, well, what if we actually did something where the students created actual value? Something where people weren't like, didn't groan when they saw them coming up through the window. They're like, "Oh, gotta buy some more of those chocolate bars that we're just going to throw away." We're like, what if these kids came up and they said, we have this project where we're creating our own internet service provider, and we're selling our own cell service, and it's something that everybody uses anyways. Everybody uses the internet. Everybody has a cell phone. Well, we can give you better service that works everywhere throughout the county, and a portion of that helps, support the school. And immediately, the school boards were just like, "Is that possible?" And so we started explaining the whole process, how World Mobile creates this equipment. And so that's just one example of one of the things where we go in and we try to take this technology to organize how we can provide these services that everybody can get involved with, everybody can benefit from. It doesn't just have to be this multinational company like AT&T that runs 45% of the cell infrastructure in the world. We can run our own infrastructure.
Yeah, dude, it's honestly crazy that you bring that up because in the US you really have 4 major companies. You have AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and Sprint if you want to include that. But I think T-Mobile and Sprint are like merging or something. But it's insane how much of a control and how expensive they actually charge stuff in America. Because I'm in Vietnam
Yep.
now, and I can get unlimited text call and 5 gigabytes of data a day for less than $10 a month. And in America, you're paying like 130, 140. So it's one of those insane
Yes.
things where it's almost like this thing that should be almost a given right at this point as a US citizen of being able to have the internet or being able to have phone connectivity has gotten to the point where every year the price just increases. And it becomes
Yes.
unaffordable for a lot of people. For people that are listening in though, can you go over a little bit more about what World Mobile is actually able to do here? Because whenever I looked at World Mobile, a lot of times they talk about connectivity in Africa and stuff like that. I didn't even realize that this was something that could be offered in America, and I also didn't realize that it sounds like individuals like yourself can help set this up. Like what? Yeah, like what's the rundown for this?
So the secret sauce there is in the United States about 5 years ago, they put together this really cool program called the CBRS, the Citizens Broadband Radio Service. And so when you've heard about cell service and the big 3, you've probably heard a lot about licensed spectrum. Okay. And so you have radio waves all throughout the United States that are governed by the FCC, the federal, or the the FCC. So basically, what happens is they said back in like the 1920s or 1930s, this is who can use what. Okay. This is for ham radio. This is only for the military. These frequencies are only for, telecommunications carriers, right? And they say who can use what frequencies to do different things. All right. And so all of that all of that licensed spectrum has been bought up by those big three carriers. All right, they own all of it. And in order to get into the game, you have to have hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, what CBRS is they basically took a range of frequencies from 3550 to 3700. So, just to simplify it for people, your Wi-Fi router is on either frequency 2400 or 5500. And so this is nestled in a range right in the middle there. And so you get pretty good data transmission and decent range. Most people with their cell phones, they operate a lot in the 700 range. So it can go really far with less power, but you can't transmit as much energy. Well, in this 3550 to 3700 range, they made it available for the CBRS. And basically what it was is it was a range that was only for the U.S. Navy. So the U.S. Navy was the only only entity that could operate in that range. And they're like, okay, this resource, these different bands of radio waves have become way too expensive and way too valuable. And you don't have the USS Missouri in Missouri, right? There's the vast swaths of the United States that the Navy doesn't operate in. They might send signals across occasionally, but now that we have fiber optic networks, they can transmit the information much faster through that. And so they set up this really cool program where you, as an individual, you can go and get licensed with the FCC as a certified professional installer. So you just take this course and you can go in. Now I can just go in and set up a grant with FCC for radio in any part of the country that that is a part of this program, which is virtually everywhere. And so I can set up my own cell towers now. And it's only $600 to take the course. Very simple. It took me, I think, 8 hours to complete the whole thing. And so now I can go out and I can buy a radio that is FCC licensed, and I can hook it into their system. And it takes me about 20 minutes to get the whole thing done. As long as I have electricity, access to the internet, I can go ahead and set this thing up 20 minutes and I can be broadcasting and set up my own PLMN code that links up to World Mobile. So the real service that World Mobile did is they basically created what is called an IMS core. And that's the server that processes all the transactions for when I say I want to watch Game of Thrones on my phone, or I want to send this text message to my uncle. That gets processed. It goes through the internet down to their IMS core. And then that core says, all right, Uncle Vernon, here's this message, or here's this phone call. So they set up their own core and they said, anybody can use this. If you set up your own network, it just goes through here. We have this agreement. You make this much money. We make this much money. And it all goes through like that. And then they also, what they did is they started making partnerships with different carriers within the United States. And so when people roam off of my network here that only covers, Chelan County, they roam onto AT&T or T-Mobile or whichever one is the strongest carrier. So that's kind of how it's set up in a way so that people can get their own networks, their own little baronies, if you will, set up within their region. And I don't know if you're very familiar with the World Mobile, what they have cooking, but they basically set up what's called Hex Guardians is the program that they're setting up. And so you buy an NFT that represents ownership of the ability to set up a network in different areas. And so we have that Hex Guardian. If you look at their website, it shows all of the area within central Washington that is within our purview. And so we can set up towers anywhere in this area, access the PLMN code, and link it with their IMS core, and people will get cell service there.
Dude, this is insane. And like, Are you charging people to use your service and tower? Like, how does that work? Are you just broadcasting for
Yeah. So
free or?
no, we set up, and then so on your end user device, you have what's called, so you know what a SIM card is, right?
Yes.
All right. So a SIM card is just an identifier for that phone, that end user device. And so your device has anywhere between 4 to 6 radios in it. And one of those is constantly broadcasting and pinging out to different towers. And all the towers say, okay, what's your, there are different codes within that eSIM. And it says, okay, what's your eSIM? Which one is it? And when it hits that tower, the tower sends a message to the IMS core and says, is this one that's authorized? And it says yes or no. And then it says, oh, yep, that's one that's authorized to operate in our network. And so it'll ping back and ping back instantly. And it's constantly doing this all the time, sending out these signals, checking with different towers, saying, oh, is that one stronger? Is that one stronger? Is that one stronger? And it'll pick the best tower for you at any given time. And so what we do is we sell an eSIM, an electronic SIM card, basically, that has all the same information, goes through all the same protocols. And so a phone can be loaded up with any number of eSIMs. And so when we go and we talk to somebody, we're like, would you like to be on our network? They're like, yes. We go onto our dashboard through World Mobile. We say, all right, this is the person. This is all their information. This is their card number. And so they pay a monthly fee that goes through there. And then now they have an eSIM that is in tandem with any other SIM card that they have on that phone that will ping our towers, jump onto our network whenever they're close. So that's how it works in a nutshell.
Interesting. And I'm guessing this is still very early on and not a lot of people have been setting this up yet. I mean, where do you think this is, like, where is it at right now and where do you think this is going? Do you believe that this sort of setup where anyone can provide this service is going to be the main transition that happens, or do you think Verizon and AT&T just have a huge stronghold on it? Do you think it'll be like an additional thing if you're in a weird area? Like, where do you see this going?
It's they do have a stranglehold in certain ways, right? And so you hear about different carriers, they'll buy out contracts from other carriers just to get people signed up onto their network, right? And so that's something that we've had to integrate as well. So when we go in, basically when somebody has a contract with AT&T or Verizon, they put um, different barriers in place to make it so people can't just jump into one of these eSIMs. They'll, you've heard of locked phones. Well, a locked phone basically makes, one of the things that they do is they make it so people cannot load a new eSIM onto that phone unless you buy the phone outright. And so those are kind of some of the barriers that they put into place, and we've had to kind of wrestle with. It's like, okay, we want to be able to sign up, 300 people this month. Okay, well, in order to do that, we're going to have to buy out the contracts on X number of phones. So we have to go and finance and say, okay, we need to make sure that we can have this set aside so that we can buy these out, so that's a seamless process of onboarding people. So the business itself of setting up one of these networks is probably more like 5 different businesses. So we were the first partner in the United States for World Mobile. And so we're the ones that are kind of running into these speed bumps
Yeah.
and sometimes these Jersey barriers, right? And just like, oh, this is actually a problem, guys. What do you guys think about this? And so they'll work on their side on the technical fixes, or they're saying, okay, well, we can do this or this. And so we figure out the business end of it. They figure out the technical side of it. And so we'll have this roadmap for anybody else in the country that's interested in doing this. And there are a lot of different Earth node operators that are like, we want to set up what you guys are doing here. How do we do that? And we're like, we're going to get a nice comprehensive package set up so that you guys can go in. You won't be blindsided by a lot of the things that we have then. And then you guys can carry on without all the pain and suffering that, being first often has a lot of issues, and that's fine. That's what we signed up for. It's a very interesting process. And they're just, I could go on and on about all the different things that you have to do to set up one of these networks yourselves. What we would like to do is, after all of the everything kind of settles out, is we will have our network set up, running well, and then we can just jump over and head over to Pennsylvania and say, all right, Earth node operator here, Enzo, here we go. This is how we set things up, right? And that kind of ties in a lot with the education part of it that we're doing with the schools. We would like this to be a very as decentralized as possible. And so, we have hundreds of kids that are involved. They go out, they sell, cell service to their aunt and uncle instead of chocolate bars. Well, every time they do that, they get ownership of the network through tokens that we issue within Mav100. And so it's all kind of percolating up and getting organized. And eventually we'll have the entire community, I think 66% of the households within the county have kids in the school system. And so it's pretty easy to compete. They're almost guaranteed to switch over whenever one of the kids goes and talks to them. As long as the service is solid, then it's a no-brainer. And so within our locality, we have a severe advantage versus some of the other big carriers. And at some point over the next 2 or 3 years, there's going to be a flip of, right now they're kind of fighting against us, but they're going to be like, there's a lot of value to these different networks, because when they set up a tower, it costs them millions of dollars. And there are going to be places up, in remote canyons and valleys
That isn't worth
where
it. Yeah.
it's like there are like 6 families, and we don't want to spend $2 million to set up a tower for 6 families. It just doesn't make sense. The return on investment will take 70 years, so they won't even bother. But we can go in there and say, all right, it'll cost us $30,000 to cover all of these families. Let's set this up, get everything going. And so eventually there will be some sort of a mesh between the two systems. Right now it's leaned pretty heavily in favor of the big carriers, because people want to be able to know that their cell phone's going to work most places. If they go on a trip somewhere across the country, they want to make sure it works. So, and World Mobile is they're the ones that are getting that set up. And they'll have nationwide service here anytime in Q2. So that'll be pretty exciting.
I find that pretty interesting that you're going the route of, onboarding and educating kids about it, because one, I think it's cool that they're learning about decentralization and like how these different, things work. But even then on like a business standpoint, it's really interesting because of course they're going to tell their parents about that and be able to teach their parents, and they're going to be excited about it. And they're going to be like, wow, maybe this service is actually better in this area. To kind of tag onto that though, so right now, if someone got, one of these SIM cards from you, it would only work in your area, right? So like if they went somewhere where there's no World Mobile token towers, would it connect to AT&T towers or something like that?
Yes.
Oh, so it would work still.
Yes, it does. Yeah. So right now, they do have partnerships with T-Mobile and AT&T. And so basically what we have to do on their phone is set up the different priorities of the different SIM cards. They have, of course, the World Mobile SIM card will be the number one priority. It'll check and see if there's one of our towers nearby. And if there isn't, then it'll say, okay, next in line is T-Mobile, because World Mobile has a better deal with them. They have a better deal on data and things like that. And so it'll check and see if that's available. If it isn't, then they'll check on AT&T last. So it will switch over. The cost of data is something that we have to balance, because we're like, okay, we get these people set up, and there's a lot of balancing as far as, okay, if they are going to we'll get them set up so that at home they have service, and at work they have service through World Mobile. And so the majority of their data that they use is going to go through our network, and then it's nearly free for that data. And then we say, okay, what are your habits as far as where you're at around, and what's your data usage and things like that, so that if they do go into a place where it's AT&T, they're not losing us a whole bunch of money on the back end on World Mobile, because if they're only in the AT&T area, well, that data is a lot more expensive. And so if they go out and they go camping and they decide, oh, I want to watch Game of Thrones, I'm going to binge watch the whole thing.
Mhm.
Well, then that could end up, okay, this month they paid us, X dollars, so $60 this month, and they used $290 worth of data. Well, that's
Yeah.
going to be a difficult thing to do. So we just have to talk to people and figure out what their habits are and what their usage is. And there are the the eSIMs, the travel eSIMs that World Mobile also offers, and so it's about educating people and making sure that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot by signing somebody up. So that's kind of a friction point for the business that will slowly go away as those partnerships get better and better with the different carriers. And eventually, as we make money, we just buy more and more towers and our coverage improves, and, looking for different people within the state to increase the amount of coverage that we have. So it'll be slow, and then all of a sudden it'll just go as profitability increases.
It's cool that this is enabling like your average person to be able to get into this business, because it was such it is such like an oligarchy, right? Where you have a few companies that
Mm,
fully control everything. So it's interesting that this is now allowing the average person to be able to get involved. Um,
yes.
and another thing that's interesting too, like for example, I have AT&T, but I'm in Vietnam and I don't want to lose my phone number because I have all my two-factor authentication. So I've just been using my phone with AT&T, and they're charging me like $170 a month, which is crazy because I can get a SIM card here for so cheap. And it's like I can imagine with World Mobile, because this can sort of be launched everywhere as long as it's allowed in that country. You could almost have like a legit global service plan that sort of balloons out as long as there's profitability for people to do this. I am curious. So I know you said that can cost a couple $1 million for an average tower for AT&T, for example. How much does it cost to sort of set one of these up? Like if someone was interested.
Okay. So if you want, they have a few different. It depends on where you're at. So if you're in an area where World Mobile has licensed spectrum, so as licensed spectrum down in the Nevada, Utah, in 4 states down there, and if you have licensed spectrum, then you operate on completely different rules than CBRS. And so in those areas, you can get really big radios that can pump a lot more amps, so you can pump a lot more power into them. And so you can, I think they have their Titans down in Reno. They're selling them for somewhere around $100,000. Okay. And then what they do is they take those and then they rent a tower on one of the taller buildings, or in one of those towers that look like trees out in the suburbs or whatever. Um, and then there's usually going to be some sort of a rental cost for where you have that set up, based off of a tower or something like that. So that would cover a licensed spectrum radio. I don't know exactly how much the rental costs are down there, but you're probably looking at somewhere between, somewhere between $1,000 and $3,000 a month, between rental and electricity. And you'll have to have something, some sort of backhaul that's probably around $1,000 a month. And so backhaul in this industry refers to an internet connection that drops you to the fiber network. So that would be the cost there. If you want to do a CBRS tower, that just plugs into a standard outlet, right? So the power costs are pretty minimal. You're working off of about 150 watts. So that's the equivalent of like 3 light bulbs. So the electricity costs
It's pretty
aren't very
negligible.
aren't
Yeah.
very large. Yeah. And then you're going to have your tower itself. So the radio that we use is the FW300i. It's a CBRS rated radio, and that runs to get everything set up about $10,000 is how much that runs. And it will reach an area. It's a 180-degree fan in the front. It actually has 3 radios in it. And in those sectors, you get about a range of, let's see here, about 200 meters or so. And then because it's a radio and there's a little bit of, the electromagnetic field is what it is, you get about 100 to 200 feet out the back. So you get decent coverage in, if you have an apartment complex or a hospital or something like that, one of these radios can cover the whole thing and a pretty decent area around it for about $10,000. And then you're going to need backhaul. And that's going to run in our area. It's much cheaper, probably about $600 a month. And so to dive into it, yeah, you're looking at about $10,000 and then a monthly recurring cost of about $600 in this area. So you can get much smaller if you want. And that basically runs a Wi-Fi network. And so you can imagine a nice router runs you probably somewhere around, anywhere from $400 to $600. And then you just have your backhaul costs, which are probably going to be around $100 to $200 per month. So
Okay. And
those are the ranges.
And like in your area right now, like with your test run in Washington, like how many users do you guys need to sort of be profitable on a monthly basis?
Well, so we have 11 of the larger towers,
which are 10 grand each, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And so after that, the initial cost, we have the expense is somewhere around 600 per unit per month. And then we have the rental cost that we've kind of baked into what we've set up is a cooperative. It's called the Mav100 Mobile Telecommunications Cooperative. And so anybody who's involved, so like I mentioned, the students, when they go out and they sell service to somebody, they say, all right, here's service. They get a little bit of an ownership in the cooperative for going out and getting somebody set up. If somebody hosts a tower, they become members of the cooperative and they get a larger share because they're hosting, they're paying for the electrical, we pay for the backhaul. And so we've set it up so that everybody can get involved. Like I said, we wanted to make it as decentralized as possible. So anybody who's running a tower, they're already part of the cooperative and they're making money off of this as well. So it reduced our costs. Of course, the amount of profit that we make gets dinged, but that was the whole point in the first place. We want to decentralize the value that is created within the local economy and pushes it out as much as possible. So I would say, running our network in the Leavenworth area, it ends up costing, somewhere around, I would say, $8,000 a month is roughly what just that small little network is. The initial investment was somewhere around 100,000. Installation costs were probably another $100,000 to $150,000. We had to set up, we had to dig trenches, we had to run cable, we had to run fiber, we had to do a lot of that kind of stuff. And then just the testing itself, a lot of that work I did myself, but we also were trying to teach the kids how it worked. So the kids would run around with cell phones and learn what IMSIs are and learn what the different codes are and know what to punch in to figure out what frequencies we're hitting at different times. So I would say that, about $150,000, and that set up a community of about 3,000 people. Now, at the end of the day, most of the money that's made there it's a unique place. It has thousands and thousands of people that come in as tourists. And so when they come into town, There are times when a population of 3,000 jumps up to 150,000, all in this little tiny area. And so it crashes the network whenever that happens. Everybody's network. So Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, all their networks crash, and nobody can use their cell phones. And so we have our little network, and it's the locals. They always have service now, right? That are on the system. So it's a big winner there. But we can also go out and sell these travel eSIMs to people who are coming through. They're like, I can't do my selfies and send them to my friends up in Vancouver, right? What the heck is going on? This is crap. We're like, all right, how we can actually help you with that. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. I would say that overall, I did, there are probably 5 communities here. They're all separate that we said, okay, we're going to separate it out by school district. And then we're going to have to infill inside of that. And so to fill the entire county, probably about $6 million is what we've put out there. And if really, yeah, it's a big ask. But when we're talking to everybody in the county and saying these are the opportunities for you guys to get involved, that spreads it out really fast. There are a lot of people that get really interested. So it's just organizing everything, making sure that we don't jump the gun. We don't get out there too fast and say, oh, make all these promises. And then, oh, there are all these technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Just kind of slow play it. We have 2 years worth of graduates now from different high schools that are familiar with it. And so it's starting to build up a large reserve of people, of young adults that are familiar with how everything works. And so, the upkeep cost and maintenance and things like that, I can just call and say, hey, Tristan, what are you up to today? He graduated last year. Do you want to go out and help, Mrs. Armstead, help her with her tower? And he's like, oh, yeah, okay. No problem. And he can either get additional shares in the cooperative, or we can just pay him out of the profits. So, yeah, it's as you can imagine, it's a very complicated thing.
Yeah, this is a lot, man.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, it all started, I guess, it started with Cardano. We've kind of gone way deep into the world mobile part of it. But it started, we were like, in the very beginning, we were like, we want to get students involved with this, but we can't. Because in order to perform transactions on the network, you have to have ADA, right? And how do students get ADA? Unless they have a parent that buys them some, you can't buy ADA unless you're 18 years or older in the United States. How do these kids, how do they get involved? How do they use this blockchain in any capacity? They can't. And so we're like, okay, how are we going to get ADA in these kids' hands? Well, we decided to go at it. Kids have bake sales, things like that at school. Well, we set up a club called a Telenet Club in the different school districts. And the Telenet Club goes in and they say, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to run our own stake pool. And so we basically said, okay, we're going to buy this equipment. It's just, like $500-$600. And we're going to donate it to this club. Just like, the booster club would say, okay, we're going to donate this popcorn maker to the FBLA, the Future Business Leaders of America, that sells concessions at the football games, right? So they donate this popcorn maker. Now the kids can use that as a way of making revenue at football games. Well, we donated this little computer, taught the kids how to build their own stake pool. And now the kids are using that stake pool to generate like bake sale. So now, and this is the tricky part, through all the taxes and everything, that crypto is a very complicated tax situation in the United States. Now these kids are the actual owners of this digital asset. They weren't given it, so people don't have to fill out any paperwork. They just own this ADA, and now they can use it. Any kid in this school has access to ADA now. just because they own the equipment and they're generating blocks and they're helping secure the network and this whole thing. And so it was this complicated mess in the beginning because, of course, people in school on school boards and in the administrations, they're pretty conservative. And when
Yeah.
they hear digital assets, they're like, that's isn't that a scam? And then you
Like, are you
explain,
scamming our kids? Yeah.
and then you
Uh,
explain the technology, and it's like, well, they're just earning ADA. And so the kids, I think they've minted between 50 and 60 blocks. They have over 10,000 ADA, right?
oh
Sitting in
wow.
there. And so the kids can actually perform transactions now on the blockchain. And then that leads into, self-driven. They've created this learn to earn platform. And so we're saying, okay, this stake pool is now this kind of a community asset, and people can go into this learn to earn platform. When they sign in and just create, their login information, they get a wallet. And now if they go and they say, okay, I'm going to learn how blockchain and how the Cardano blockchain works. What's EUTXO? Something like that. Then they earn a little bit of ADA for going in from this pool that's generating, this stake pool that's generating a community uh, pool of ADA. And then they learn a little bit about it and they're like, oh, well, I could use that in my business. And so what we're trying to do is set up this way for people to learn about blockchain using this community asset that's based in the schools. Yeah, it's a it's a big
It's a
complicated.
lot to figure out. I mean, that's what happens though when you're sort of pioneering and you're the first to kind of go through
Yeah.
the trial fire, so to speak. You learn a lot about the processes, the systems, the roadmaps, the hurdles. And I think what's really cool though is once you get this figured out, you have the blueprint for other people to do it. And I mean,
Yeah.
even yourself, you can expand this to other areas and sort of find other unique situations in areas like the one you're in where there isn't coverage. There are other
Yes.
communities like the ones that you're in, and you either yourself can go to those different communities and put it there yourself, or you can teach people how to do it and they can
Mm-hmm.
sort of make their own bubbles and you sort of give them the roadmap on it. I we are heading towards the end of the podcast already, which is insane, but I did want to get into more two things. Like one, you had brought up the Mav 100 and some sort of like ownership aspect. Like I'd like to know a little bit more about like what the actual Mav 100 is about. And then also, I saw that you guys made an announcement recently about this self-driven building fiat liquidity for Cardano. I'd like to tag into that too. Um, but yeah, the first thing is like with Mav 100, you somehow are like, is Mav 100 all about setting this up and having people have like an ownership aspect, or how is it set up?
Yes. So what we did is we set up a cooperative association in the state of Washington. I mentioned it earlier, the Mav100 Mobile Telecommunications Cooperative. And so what we did in the bylaws and the articles of incorporation is we said, all right, there are going to be 4,000 um, basically shares in this corporation that's a cooperative. And we said, all right, if you can have, we can sign the contracts and say, okay, you want to buy in, here, this represents your shares, or you can have this digital asset that is represented by an NFT on the Cardano blockchain. And if you have one of these, that also represents a share in this cooperative. And so if you own one of these NFTs, you also own a share of this corporation that makes money. We've had about a year and a half that our network has been up, and we're finally to the point where all those costs are starting to get overridden by the amount of money that's coming in. And so in quarter 2, we're going to be sending out, basically, if you have one of these NFTs in your wallet, the profits are just going to start trickling in. And eventually on the self-driven platform on their org site, you'll be able to go in and claim. Some people, they won't want to, they'll say, okay, I want these profits to go towards more shares in these different networks that we're setting up. And so we're going to set up a regime where if you want to take the profits, then here you go. Just go ahead and claim it. Or instead, you can say, I want my profits to go towards ownership of more air nodes and more networks. And so their share of the ownership of the entire company will just increase if they decide to opt into that. So that's kind of how that works.
These NFTs
And
are
then
already
there's this.
available. These NFTs have already
Yes.
been. Okay, what are they called? I
Yeah,
looked
the
up
Mav100
Mav100 and
the seed NFT. Let me jump over here. And it's honestly been a very long time since I oh, Eternal. They just updated their app, and so I don't want to set up. I just want to look at my stuff. All right, whatever. The Mav100 seed NFT is what it's called. Let's see here. Let me get back to
NFT. Yeah, I must be spelling this wrong. So that's interesting though. So you guys already have the NFTs, and this is a way for people to sort of invest in and get ownership in what you guys have done without needing to do all
Yep.
the lifting.
Yep, exactly. And so let me see here. Let me look at the on Cardano scan. I'll get the policy ID here. And then I can throw it into the chat. Okay, there's the policy ID.
Sweet. Yeah, let me take a look. Okay, so that's cool that you're able to essentially. Okay, I see it. Mav100 MCA. I think for whatever reason, JPEG Store
No.
doesn't have like your link.
Oh, we didn't verify in the beginning because we did this mint over a year ago, back when the SEC was being very mean to people, and so we didn't want to. We spoke with a lot of lawyers, and we basically talked to them about this aspect, and they're like, well, if you verify on one of these platforms, that's basically telling that exchange that you are okaying the trading of this asset. And that's one of the vectors that the SEC was using to attack different crypto projects. But now the SEC has totally changed its colors. And at this point, we're like, oh, well, we could probably go in and just verify these things and they'll pop up. But we didn't want to be exposed or expose any of our holders to any risk from the SEC. And that's why we didn't verify in the beginning.
Okay, makes
But
sense.
yeah,
That's why I
there
couldn't
are.
find it. Yeah.
So, and now that the NFTs are going to start producing value from the profits of the company, it's probably a good idea to get these things verified. So I'll talk to the other founders. We'll have to have some votes and move forward with that.
I was gonna say,
so
are you planning on having more NFTs or a deeper sale in the future to like help fund more operations, or is it just these NFTs that are
yeah.
already out?
So we've sold about 1,000, and there are a total of 4,000 available. So in the future, we will probably make more of those available. And a lot of it's going to depend on how we move forward as far as, okay, we've got our own network set up here. Now we want to help somebody else set up a network in a different state. Do we make some of those available for that? Help to fund, those types of operations. So yeah, we'll have to really, once we have this locked down, in the beginning, it took a little bit of time for the cell service to become available. And so we were like, okay, we thought that we were going to immediately be making profits off of this, but that's not the case. So we looked at other ways of making profits. So we took some of the money that we raised, some more money locally, and we said, okay, let's just start up our own internet service provider. Let's start offering our own TV service. Let's start offering landlines, things like that, so that we have these other, revenue streams that we can add into this. And so, yeah, we'll be looking to expand these different businesses in different places. And so, yep, in the future, we're definitely looking to offer more of these NFTs,
Oh yeah, and then
more ownership.
I guess like the last question I have is the self-driven thing. You guys just announced this. So, like,
Okay.
what's this about?
All right. So what we're trying to do is we're setting up a finance exchange, and it's not, some crazy thing like, well, okay. So imagine a service like Celsius, right, where people can say, "Here's money," kind of set up a crypto um, exposure regime for me, right? And so what we did is we're like, okay, what we want to do is I have these different businesses that I'm involved with that already have revenue streams that have been going for over 30 years. So I can go ahead and take that. With one of my businesses, I have retained earnings, so profits that have already been taxed that I can put into um, the crypto realm as a business. And so I can go ahead and set up this exchange and get myself and my business involved. And then I can go and what I want to do is set up a system where my business, Watera USA, I have over 1,800 clients that I would also like to leverage the Cardano blockchain to create systems where using smart contracts and the blockchain itself, we can store information and we can move value around. And so I want to be able to do this with different businesses that I'm involved with. So the US Geological Survey would be a good example, or, there are 30 different universities that we sell products to. They go out and they do DNA sampling and things like that we sell filters for. Well, let me just give you an example of what the finance exchange would do is in the beginning, I would go out and I'd say, there's this really cool network. It's one of the top 3 most secure networks in the world. It's called Cardano. You can invest in it. You can go ahead and buy these tokens that give you governance ability, that can act as a store of value, that you can buy things with, or you can get involved with DeFi and start investing in other things because they're starting to become aware of different blockchain products like BTC as a store of value, for example. And so I can just say, if you get involved, you'll have this asset that, there's going to be some volatility, but it will have value in the future because you'll be able to perform transactions on this network. And that is going to get more and more expensive as time goes on because the value of the asset will continue to increase as an increase on the transaction volume increases. And so I can talk to these people that I've been doing business with for 30 years and just say, it's a good idea to get a little bit of this asset. And so they go ahead and invest a little bit. And now we can collaborate and work together and say, okay, you sample wells in 3 different states, and in the groundwater industry, basically people have to sample and make sure that there isn't contamination. So one of the big users is gas stations. So you have thousands and thousands of gas stations across the country, and they all have these little test wells. Well, we need to test different things about those wells. And so what we would do is we'd take it and say, this is an NFT that represents well number 3 at the Shell gas station on this corner in Seattle, Washington. All right. And so now we have this NFT that has metadata that says this is the dissolved oxygen level. This is the amount of benzene that was reported here. And so there are hundreds of these different things that they have to keep track of in all of these different wells. And so what we can do is I'm working with a guy who takes equipment and basically sends it down the well, and he has these multi-parameter probes that measure all these different things that you need to know about the water. And instead of measuring it, writing it down on a little piece of paper, and then entering it into a spreadsheet, and then sending that in, and then somebody at the EPA says, okay, our groundwater guy needs to go ahead and start entering all this down into our database. We can say the EPA can go and just access this information that's in the metadata of this NFT on this public network that's more secure than anything that they've come up with, right? The Cardano network is the blockchain itself is this incredibly secure thing. And so we can have this data on this well We can have data on every well, millions of wells across the United States that's all on this blockchain. And so we can go in with this finance exchange and I can say, okay, guys, now have this ADA, and we can create this platform and these smart contracts that accomplish all of these efficiencies. You don't have to have a guy writing this down. You don't have to have a guy emailing it to this other guy who then writes it down and then inputs it into his database. It just goes straight from that equipment that's in that well up into the metadata through a smart contract that's linked up with that equipment. And then that's automatically downloaded. And anytime the EPA wants to check it, smart contracts check and see if the parameters for that well, for that water, by whatever they satisfied, are at the level that they want. And if anything comes up as red flag, says, oh, this one, there's too much benzene over here. And it automatically says to the EPA, and they get a little thing that says, oh, this is too high. We need to send somebody out. And then, oh, there's a smart contract there that says these are the people that deal with the remediation for that type of contamination. It automatically sends a note to them. And they receive that. Oh, well, there's another place where a smart contract can be implemented. They say, oh, we already have bids for the remediation on that type of contamination in that type of an area. And so and then now we have an exchange that says, oh, look, we have this amount of contamination. These are the readings. This is how much we would have bid on that already. And then, so through this process that would take years normally, it can happen in a week. Somebody could already know that they have a project. They can already have all the equipment set up. And they're just like, oh, looks like we got this contract through the EPA. And normally it does. It takes years for this process to happen, for this water to get cleaned up, for these people to do this work. So in that example, you can kind of see the efficiencies in one example of a business. So I can go out as basically an ambassador or a missionary to these people for this technology through my finance exchange. And then when we get these contracts set up for our finance exchange, maybe somebody who's involved with the creation, maybe they manufacture motors, something like that. They say, you know what? Now I understand that business. I can go ahead and set up my own little exchange. The Cardano community is very large. I know a guy who's involved with heavily with World Mobile, and they manufacture a variety of things. And he could do the same thing. So that's what the finance exchange proposal and the Cardano Treasury proposal is about, is basically setting up these contracts, both legal contracts and then setting up smart contracts that can start to replace them, is integrating Cardano into the business world. And there are thousands of businesses that could benefit from this.
Man, that example you gave is really interesting. I think crypto and blockchain has still been early for a lot of people. And, you spoke on it earlier about parents maybe being worried that the kid's getting into some scam or something. But I think over time, like you said, there's just so many inefficiencies that blockchain can solve. And right now it's almost too early where a lot of these things have like not occurred yet. But I think are inevitably going to occur.
Yes.
Just because they're more it's just more efficient. And I
Yeah.
think like, especially in a capitalistic system, like you end up striving towards efficiency and cost, because like this is more cost saving. It's more, when you save costs, you're making more money. You have better net profits. You have faster turnaround. You have less waste. And, I get, yeah, I mean, it's just a win across the board once some of these things get adopted. And I think you're doing some really cool stuff. Like, this is the 26th podcast I've had in the last not even 2 months.
Oh, wow.
And I've talked to a lot of founders and learned about their businesses and projects. And this is definitely one of the most interesting ones to me, just because of how real world use case this is of being able to see a real problem and actually use blockchain to be able to solve that.
Mm-hmm.
and be able to do that in a cool, creative way, like you have through teaching kids and getting the community involved and having decentralized ownership in what you're doing. So yeah, super cool stuff, man. I've appreciated having you on, Cameron. We are at that hour mark, and was there any, and Gunny, you had asked in the chat, is there still legal reasons why it's not verified on JPG? They just said they have to do it soon. I don't think there's any
Yeah.
issues anymore.
No, there aren't. They've basically just said we're hands off. We're gonna
Mhm.
see how this can benefit everybody. And on our side, we're just gonna keep in contact with our lawyers, make sure that everything's legit. That's what this is all about: is creating this legitimate use case for the entire ecosystem. I think that's one thing that's going to be really important for different blockchains moving forward. Is Cardano can come out and be the blockchain of security, the blockchain of transparency, right? Some other blockchains have they've built up a reputation that isn't as approachable for a more conservative crowd, and so I think that's an advantage that Cardano can really take advantage of. And so we'll see how it
100%.
moves forward.
Well, dude,
Yeah,
to
man.
wrap this up, I mean, was there any like final sort of announcements that you want to make of anything coming up soon before we wrap any last minute
Well,
shout out?
yeah, right now the big thing that we're working on is this proposal with the Treasury, and we're going to expand on it. It's on GovTools right now. We basically kind of put in a rough draft placeholder for it for the finance exchange, but we're going to expand on it. We have several more pages that we need to add. I think the deadline is the 24th. But yeah, if we get this funding proposal through, it'll be really huge. So if you have a DREP, let them know. We're trying to push this blockchain out into every avenue that we can possibly think of. So we need it. We need it in schools. We need it in businesses. We need to kind of move away from just having it on these centralized exchanges and start creating these benefits for society. And then society is going to wake up and say, oh, okay, this blockchain, it doesn't just have a bunch of meme coins. It has these things that are helping students, helping schools, helping businesses become more efficient. And I think that would be a really big push for everybody.
Mic drop, mic drop. But once again, thank you so much for coming on, Cameron. It was a pleasure getting to know what you guys are doing at Mav100, and thank you to everyone who listened in today. I hope you all have an awesome day, and best of luck with everything you're doing, Cameron. And hopefully your
All
proposal
right.
gets through.
All
Awesome.
right. Thanks a lot, guys.
We'll catch y'all
It was a
later.
pleasure.